Let's talk about Billy Carson's disastrous debate with Wes Huff. Good morning, guys. It is a rainy day here in Akron, Ohio, and I'm sitting here sipping actually a mug of broth. I wanted to hop on and talk about this debate that's all over YouTube right now. And the first thing I'd say is this: before choosing a camp, go watch the debate. It's out there. It's on multiple people's channels are posting the whole thing. Billy Carson is trying his best to sue them to pull it down. But I would just suggest you go watch it before you choose a side. One of the things that's interesting about this debate in particular is at the beginning of the debate, they were both very cordial, and one of them remained cordial to the very end, and one of them got up and walked out. What was so interesting about the debate to me was when Billy Carson claims to be, and this is, you can see this online everywhere, he claims to be the foremost expert in ancient texts. And what was so interesting was when confronted with Wes Huff, who was being extremely respectful. In fact, he says, all due respect. He kept saying, I don't want to, he was being very kind. Every time that Billy Carson would come up with a point, and like, for instance, he said, Billy Carson kept saying, and the Sinai Bible says this, and the Sinai Bible says this, and the Wes Huff says, I just for clarity, I need to understand. When you say Sinai Bible, are you referring? What book are you referring to? Because I don't know of one that's literally called the Sinai Bible, and he goes back and forth, and eventually, Wes Huff says, "Do you mean the Codex Sinaiticus?" And it's called the Codex Sinaiticus because it was found in St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt at the base of what is considered to be Mount Sinai, which was labeled that by Constantine's mother, in the 4th century. What's interesting is that Billy Carson says, yes, this is the Codex Sinaiticus. And the claim that Billy Carson was making was that the crucifixion is not in the Codex Sinaiticus. Well, when Wes Huff's like, really? Okay, so I just want to be clear on that because, and he reached behind him and he pulled out a book that had photocopies of the Codex Sinaiticus. And he was like, the crucifixion's in here. He says this book is very close to the modern Bible, but scholars will tell you there are over 14,000 discrepancies between the two, but most of the discrepancies are not in context; they're more in grammar. So that's one aspect of this. So he pulls it out. He says doesn't say this. Billy Carson says, okay, fine. He says, I made a mistake. I misquoted. I meant the book of Barnabas. And he says, oh, okay. So the book of Barnabas. He pulls out this information. The book of Barnabas was a Renaissance era forgery. He says, and they know this because it references Dante's Inferno, which wasn't written until 1300. Billy Carson says, well, if you say it's a forgery, I believe that. He just basically gave it to the guy. So he called out Sinaiticus as having the crucifixion in it, which Billy claimed multiple times that it's not in there. He called out the Barnabas thing, and Billy agreed, okay, this must be a forgery. And then Billy said, well, let's go to the Old Testament. And what was really interesting was nothing Billy said in the entire debate was actual factual stuff. It was all opinion. He was giving his opinions on what this means, on opinions on what that means. He was giving his negotiated beliefs into these texts without giving any factual evidence. Wesley Huff was literally pulling out, because his whole life has been studying the Bible and ancient texts, learned the language, lived in those countries. It literally is a very well-educated scholar of the Bible. But Wes Huff is an interesting character too, because Wes Huff is a scholar of the Bible because that's his faith. And so in part of the argument, he said, well, we believe this is this, this, and this. But that sentence started with, we believe that. Scholars believe that. The word belief is the negotiated part. They believe that this meant, but they have no idea what they're actually saying, 1,500, 2,000 years ago. So they're looking at these texts both from two different perspectives. One of them is coming from the negotiation with these texts to prove theories that are controversial, so that he can sell speeches, sell videos, sell books, sell products. The other one, Wesley Huff, is very well versed in his scholarly work, very much able to pull the text out, from the top of his head and then turn around, grab books off his shelf and do it. Highly respect that. But all of his work is coming from his belief in the Messiah being Jesus, and still very much a Christian belief. So their arguments are at conflict. However, one of them can pull out documented proof of what he's saying. But that documented proof of what he's saying is still ancient texts that were written, set somewhere between 70 and 200 years after the crucifixion as sacred text, and not even turned into a Bible until the 4th century. So he's saying that all these books are infallible because he's seen all these evidences that all these books say the same thing, but he never questions the root origin of the book, whereas they weren't written in the time that Jeshua walked the earth. So he's coming from his scholarly work from a very faith in Christianity perspective, which I more than welcome to. He spiritualized a personal journey. It's one of the reasons why I respect Dan McClellan so much, because Dan keeps his Mormon faith out of his scholarly work, and he gets in trouble for it. But he's like, I only follow the data, and that's why he's constantly saying data over dogma. Dan McClellan, amazing guy. Billy Carson kept spewing all kinds of things up and started throwing all these negotiations to what the books were saying, and tying it to aliens and everything else, and tying it to social injustices of today's time, and how women are being treated horribly, and Christians do this and Christians do that, and he was just looking for controversial topics to throw out to argue against this other guy's data. In the end, Billy Carson talked easily as much, if not more, than Wes Huff did. Billy Carson's responses were all very argumentative and very trying to attack things, but only from opinion and negotiated ideas that are not found in the text. And we know that because Wes Huff was able to then show that what he was claiming was not found in the text that he was claiming they were found in. The interesting thing is, by the end, Wes Huff started having technical difficulties on his end, and he kept losing connection, coming back in. And during that time, Billy Carson was able to just talk, and he was able to put out all his stuff without any rebuttal after the debate was done. And we know it was a cordial debate because Billy, at the beginning of the video, says, thank you for coming. This is great. He felt it was wonderful. At one point, the host said, thank you guys for being so cordial and respectful. And Billy said, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that you're being respectful. Right. So Billy wasn't saying that this was a bad thing for him during the debate itself. Well, 2:00 in the morning, Billy Carson showed up at the guy's house saying, hey, I need you to not let this video go out because it'll hurt my business. It'll hurt me. And now Billy Carson is trying to sue the host and sue the guy he was debating, because in reality, when you look at the actual video and you watch the actual video, the guy trounced him. The guy literally deflated every argument he ever had, and Billy agreed with him that it was deflated. Yeah, okay, that's a forgery. I'll take you on that. Oh, it's in the Sinaiticus. Oh, okay. He was very much just conceding to everything this real scholar was saying. That video I did on spiritual entrepreneurship, I mentioned Billy Carson in it. And the reason I mentioned him in it is because it was very obvious he had no clue what the actual history was, and he had not actually studied the text. He had pulled out specific passages to make controversial video topics and controversial interview matter, so that he could get more and more followers to make more and more money. He recently put out a video talking about how he was blindsided and all this stuff. But you watch the interview, he definitely was not blindsided. He was very, very active. until the guy started literally taking down his theories, which is what you do in a debate. It literally is a debate, right? I'm debating what you're saying. Billy's new video that he released, he's complaining about how he was blindsided. He was complaining about how this guy is. He actually claimed that the guy was getting his information off of ChatGPT. Well, the guy was reaching behind him and pulling books out off the shelf behind him. So is that ChatGPT? I don't think so. Billy's argument went on to say that he was dying and he had pneumonia, and he started creating all these stories. Now, whether he was sick or not doesn't matter. When you watch the interview, he was in clear mind. He was in clear mind. And his wife came on to the interview saying, "Yeah, he was near death, and these people used and abused him." It was a very cordial conversation, and even the guy Wes Huff many times says, "No disrespect. I'm not trying to disrespect you. I'm just trying to pull out the facts." And it was Wes Huff was very calm, very cool. He never got heated. Billy did get heated. He got heated because he was challenged, and it was affecting his belief. When they were having all the technical difficulties at the end, and Billy was having a chance just to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and suddenly uh, Wes came back on. Billy put on his glasses, says, "I got to go," and he leaves. And so it was a very, very unique debate to watch, because Billy was all of his stuff was completely debunked. Everything was completely debunked. Wes was very much having the information that Billy was claiming to have. Wes had his thing where this is Christian theology as opposed to history. So when you look at it from that perspective, they both had their various slants, but one of them was actually a Bible scholar, an ancient text scholar, and Billy tried to pull out an obscure passage from an obscure text. Billy actually said the book of Genesis, portions of it were directly from this other text, which I don't even know the name of. And the guy says, "Well, can you give us the synopsis of that text?" And Billy goes off on this long story about planets and becoming the Earth and humans and solar systems and all this stuff, right? And Wes Huff says, yeah, but where was it directly taken from? And Billy says, "Well, the water from the water." That was the only thing he said, this one line. And he says, "Yeah, but we find that in multiple texts all over the place. So it's not necessarily from that particular one." And then Wes Huff starts going into this text that Billy claims to be an expert on, and Wes Huff just takes down everything he's saying, because Wes Huff actually had the information on that text. It was fascinating to watch. Billy put out this video to rebut what happened. His arguments, as I said, were, I was dying, I was this. He says, "I had things in my mind, like one of my 5 air conditioners is going out, and I don't know which one." He says, I got back to my house, and I decided not to use the elevator, and I took up my 5 flights of stairs, and I was out of breath at the top." And this is all after the fact. This had nothing to do with the debate. He says, "And when they put the video out, I was asleep in my movie theater in my home," because I have a movie theater in my home. And he kept posturing all these very wealthy things he has. But he never actually said anything that negated Wes Huff's side of the debate. This is what I talked about in that first video. You create an asset of something controversial, you put it out there in a big way, and you sell it, and you make a lot of money on it, right? He even went on so far in his rebuttal to say, you know, I don't have book deals where publishers are buying my books. I have my own publishing company. He says, "I don't have clothing deals because I have my own clothing company." He starts showing on this nice jacket too. He starts doing pitch stuff. He just kept saying, I am this multi-million-dollar entrepreneur, and I'm doing all this stuff, and that's why I'm right, and this guy who studies the history of ancient texts is wrong." He never actually debated anything that Wes Huff said, and Wes Huff just dismantled his entire story. And that's why Billy Carson is now suing these guys, not because he was sidelined or sideswiped or blindsided. He's suing them because it's really going to hurt his spiritual entrepreneurial business. That's the sole reason. Because Billy's business is based upon Billy being the foremost expert in ancient texts, and an expert in ancient texts just took him down. When I first put out that video on spiritual entrepreneurship, and I mentioned Billy Carson and Greg Braden, um, I explained exactly this: how they were finding the most controversial stuff, many of which were coming from known forgeries. The Gospel of the Essenes, the Essene Gospel of Peace, the Gospel of the Holy 12. All of these forgeries and texts, and they're making their money off of claiming that they're real. And what's happening now with Billy Carson is it's being shown that he is not teaching what was actually in these texts. So it's really interesting to me to watch him. He's imploding right now, and the reason he's imploding is because he's getting angry, and he's fighting back, and he's calling the guy names. And what is that? It's slander. What did Socrates say? When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. So he's actually slandering everybody right now, saying that they're doing all these horrible things to him. But I go back to what I said at the beginning. Go watch the debate. Just go watch the debate. If you go watch the debate, you're going to come away with this understanding that Billy Carson has no clue what he's talking about in negotiating text in. And Steve Huff knows a lot about all the ancient texts, but he's coming at it from his very theological Christian slant. But of the two of them, he's the one who's more versed and more well prepared to have a debate because he has the text to back him up, whereas Billy does not. And so when I put that video out about spiritual entrepreneurship, it wasn't to bash Billy. In fact, if you remember correctly in that video, I literally said he's a businessman, and he's got a business, and he's working it. His business is selling controversy and fear, and the ideas of conspiracy are all his business. He puts that out there so he gets more views, so he makes more money, so he has an elevator and movie theater and clothing lines and his own publishing company, and that's why he does what he does. And when he's confronted by someone who actually knows the text that he claims to know all about, he immediately loses because the guy can literally reach behind him, pull out photocopies of the text he claimed they were in, especially the first one, no crucifixion. It's right in that text. And Billy just concedes and tries to get on to a different topic. So I guess my point of this is when I made that video a long time ago, I had a lot of people come out to me and says, John, you shouldn't talk about these other spiritual leaders who are doing this stuff. I think people who are spreading false information and claiming it to be the only way and the fact and the truth need to be shown. I think they need to be shown for who they are. I have never once told anybody to believe what I believe. I've never once told anybody on my channel or anywhere else that my truth has to be the only way. In fact, I've said spirituality is a personal journey and you find your own truth. I'm never trying to convince you of anything I'm saying, ever. Ever. I'm just speaking my truth. Billy Carson, Greg Braden, a lot of these spiritual entrepreneurs, they're trying to convince you because that's where their income comes from. That's where the money comes from. And Wesley Huff very quickly will negate a lot of things because of his Christian theology mixed into his scholarly work. And the host of the debate he never should have spoken because he really was showing his lack of knowledge in many things. But he would just talk on top of these two guys who had a lot to say. They both had lots to say, lots of information. But what was so interesting about the host was he did at the end of that interview call out Wes Huff in defense of Billy, saying, "Where are you getting this information?" And then Wes Huff would say, "Well, we believe, scholars believe that." And the second you use that word "believe," you've just taken the actual factual evidence out and you've now made it a matter of faith. And so Billy was trounced. No doubt about it. He lost that debate huge. He's trying to come back and say that, this, that, or the other thing. But I think when somebody is skewing information specifically to have his own lifestyle, and then when he's shown that his information is false and he starts slandering and calling other people names, I think it really comes down to understanding that he's the one who's not being truthful and honest. And to me, that's it's sad. It's sad because people listen to it and they buy into it. And quite honestly, I hope for Billy's sake, I hope he comes out of this more humble, because he's not humble at all, and he's selling controversy. He's selling controversy, and he's not selling it because it is a controversy. He's selling controversy because it makes him money, and that's been my whole take on spiritual entrepreneurs out there. I know another guy who used to be a professional comedian, and now he's a big spiritual leader out there on YouTube. And I actually worked with him on a show one time and saw the way he treated people. And I had people in tears because of the things he said to them. You don't have the ability, you don't have the chops, is what he kept saying. And it was just like I was consoling people the entire time. And now he's a spiritual entrepreneur. What's interesting about that is I'm not going to say his name because, yeah, I don't want to go there. But what's really interesting is at the time that I worked with him was on a comedy show. And at the time, he had a marketing guy with him, and they were figuring out how to become a spiritual entrepreneur. He literally was spending all his spare time creating this new pathway for a career making millions of dollars as a spiritual entrepreneur. And so it really comes down to, if you're trying to sell the controversy, if you're trying to um, find an asset that you can market, then it really is more about, is the asset truth, or is the asset a negotiation with text to make it as controversial as it can be so it makes more money? People are going to look at this video and they're going to say that I'm bashing Billy. He's welcome to his business. He can do his business. But when his business crumbles because it's shown to be fallacy, I think we need to be able to say that too. I had one woman who has a tarot channel who literally says, we're not going to bash other spiritual leaders. Well, I don't think you're a true spiritual leader if what you're selling is falsehood. I think that is the fruit that they're bearing. And when that fruit is shown to be sour, people should be told that that fruit is sour. As far as Billy Carson's concerned, I think we're going to watch it play out. Wes Huff is going to stand on the top of his successful debate performance, and he's going to be very proud of that. And he's going to leverage that towards pushing people towards Christianity. Billy Carson is going to be loud and obnoxious and trying to debunk it. But go back, watch the debate. You'll see exactly what I saw. And you'll come away going, oh, Billy Carson is not being honest. He's not being truthful. And he's being debunked right and left. There was not one thing in that debate that Billy Carson won. Not one thing in that debate that Billy Carson won. And that's why he's upset right now. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon. See you. Bye.